It is happening. We're going to start getting some attendees here any minute.
We have more than 20, Jamie.
Happy days.
Yeah.
More than 20 people want to hear about what we're going to say.
It's because it's going to be good. Hey, everyone. Welcome. I am your head of community, Katie Ray. I'm so excited for this session today. Obviously you guys must be excited too, because you are here. And as we are letting folks into the room here, please, let's get some practice. Drop in the chat, just like Ryan did. Say hi. Make sure that your chat is turned to everybody, because so often I'll tell people like, say hi, tell us where you're coming from, and then I'll put to host and panelists. And so make sure your chat's turned to everyone. But we want to know where you're coming from, who you are, and what you're most excited about. So obviously Ryan is pretty excited because he wore his shirt ready for today. So Ryan, as always, you got to take a pic, put it on LinkedIn. I'm very excited about that. And we've got some really great folks in here. Andrew, Christy, it's so great to see y'all. So, and Eli coming from Austin. We're only 5 hours away from you. I'm only 5 hours away from you. So could have just driven over here in person. And now Jamie and Fran, you guys are in the UK, correct?
We are, yeah. I'm in Manchester and Jamie's in London. So we're not together. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's like a short train ride, right? Like it's not too far.
Yeah, it's like 2 hours. Like I'm in the north and James in the south. So we have some north-south plans.
It's funny whenever I tell people, you know, with me being in Texas, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll drive to Dallas on a day trip, no big deal. And they're like, how far? And I'm like, that's about five, maybe 6 hours. And they're like, in a car as a day trip, and just completely blown away by it.
We have a trip planned next year to like me and some friends, we're doing like Nashville and like New Orleans, and I'm like, oh, we can stop here, it's not that far. Everywhere's so far. It's so far.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine. Well, Mitchell, it's so great to see you here. We've got some really great folks. I'm excited. So just a few housekeeping things as more people are tuning in. For today, say hello, drop where you're coming from in the chat. Make sure your chat is turned to everybody. And then throughout the conversation today, there's going to be lots of opportunities for y'all to ask questions. I have seen what they have prepared, and it is like getting into the details, which I'm thrilled about. And so many of you will see this and have questions. Drop it in the Q&A box. There's a little panel at the bottom of the screen. There's a little Q&A box. Drop it in there. We'll ask it in real time. And if there's some other questions that you have, like certain scenarios that you want to talk through, we can ask that at the end as well. So make sure you drop them in there. And so we'll just start off with intros. And Jamie, if you want to kick us off with an intro, tell us who you are and what you do and one thing you're excited about from today's presentation.
Sure thing. So yeah, I'm Jamie. Like mentioned, I live in London. I started at Cognism as demand gen manager last February. So basically I handle everything: campaigns, ads, generating demand for Cognism's products and services, basically. So
bringing in that business.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, just excited to interact with the audience really and see what questions they have for us, and if there's anything we can learn from these guys as well. So yeah, be cool to get going.
Awesome. And Fran, tell us a little bit about you. Sure, I'm Fran, head of demand gen at Cognism, been here about 2 years now. Yeah, based in Manchester. Got a great team. So Jamie sits on my team with some other great demand gen managers, and yeah, we've spent the last sort of 12 months trying to crack the shift from lead gen to demand gen. If anyone's seen our journey on LinkedIn, we've tried to be like super honest about it, the mistakes that we've made. We're still learning. So I guess I'm excited just to learn something new from the audience, like on this call, and any new ideas, send them our way. So yeah. Oh, you're on mute.
We just had this conversation too. For everyone that was not here on the prep call, we just had this discussion. So sorry. But I said, I'm very excited about this conversation today. We're really going to get into some very tactical and practical pieces of advice, conversations. Like I said, if you've got questions anytime, if you're like, oh, I don't know, you can ask questions anonymously, whatever you need, drop it in the Q&A, or if you want to put it in the chat, I'm here to help facilitate that. But I'm very excited because I know this is stuff that I'm going to learn a lot from, and hopefully all of y'all will as well. So with that, I will put myself back on mute and let Fran and Jamie take it over. So let's get started, y'all.
Thank you. Amazing, thank you. So Jamie and I have some slides. We wanted to be really make this really tactical, really actionable. So we've got a lot of detail there. We can share the slides afterwards, so please don't worry about noting it all down. And I think this is being recorded, so I'm sure we can share that afterwards. Again, please do ask questions. I have a tendency to talk a lot, so I'm happy to be interrupted by Katie if anyone has a burning question. But let me just kick off with what we've got, and hopefully, yeah, this can be really interactive as well. So I'll try not to rely too much on my slides, but let's kick it off. Oh no, it's not that slideshow. Okay, can everyone see this? Katie, do you want to just confirm? Oh, you can. Okay, great. Okay, so our chosen topic, so escape the lead gen merry-go-round. It's something that we have been doing, so we want to, show that we're practicing what we preach. So really, this is a practical insight into kind of where we were 12, 18 months ago, living in this lead gen world, and where we're up to now. So what steps we took to move into a demand gen world, problems we faced, and sort of ideas to share with you guys on initiatives that have worked particularly well, and ideas that we're going to focus on going into 2023. So hopefully this is really transparent and just shows you guys, gives you a bit of inspo and sparks a few questions. So I will begin. So this is my favorite, it's my slide about the old way, the old days. So I don't know, I've been in marketing for about 10 years. So this used to be my bread and butter, this whole workflow, and this is something we ran regularly at Cognism as well when I joined Cognism. You create the ebook, you add it to a gated landing page, you run those ads on paid social, and the main goal behind it is generating as many leads as possible. So I lived in a world where I focused on cost per lead and the calls with sales, being how are the leads, what stage are they at the funnel, there's leads in the queue, no one's following up with them, and that's kind of what we did really. And we did this on rinse and repeat, so we'd have 2, 3, 4 ebooks a year, we'd collect the leads, sales would call them, and that would basically be that. So yeah, that's what we were working with. We knew something had to change. We knew something had to change because the leads we were getting more and more leads, so we're getting more successful at tricking people into downloading our content, but the more leads we got didn't result in more revenue or more pipeline. In fact, the leads just took longer and longer to get through the funnel. So we know we had to make a change. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the main changes that we made, and then also kind of the attribution and how we look at measuring things differently. So that's kind of the old way, which I'm sure everybody's pretty familiar with. So this is the new way. So we focused on building out a media machine. So we knew we had to change something with our content. We knew that our content wasn't as valuable as it could be, and the reason being is we were in such a rush to get out the most buzzworthy topic so that people would download it. So we knew that the quality wasn't up there essentially. So this is kind of the new way. So what a media machine means to us at Cognism. So for us, it was about building our own audience. So not relying on events, trade shows, collecting leads from ebooks. It was our own audience that were engaged with Cognism, what we were about, and the value that we were serving. So we talk about that in terms of key subscriber channels. So we started to work on a podcast, how can we get a regular community of people engaging with us? So that was one of the things we focused on, and also YouTube, getting subscribers there. So again, it states it here, but creating processes around content enables you to consistently produce quality content, and also that can power different areas of your marketing engine. So for us, we do a podcast, but we do live events, we snippet those up, we run them on paid social, we create blogs out of them, different campaigns. So it's about this creating this value-led content, but making it work as hard as possible. Again, the key ingredients, the quality of the content has to have a point of view, which is a bit scary sometimes because you have to kind of make a stance on something and people don't always agree, but that's okay. And then just consistency. So a big thing for us was, okay, we can do all this great value-led stuff, but how do we make sure that happens regularly? Because if not, we're not going to like make this impact. So I'm just going to move on to kind of like what the structure looks like and where to begin. So when we started on Media Machine, we were very focused around knowing our audience. So the idea behind this, here we go. The idea behind this was thinking about where our audience actually hang out. So we had like loads of conversations around like what channels, and I used to have these a lot as a marketer in other companies as well. We need to be on every channel all the time. Like that's the mentality. So we were like having conversations around like, oh, we're not doing anything on Twitter. We must. But when we actually took a step back, we were like, well, where are our audience? Like, is that where our key ICP sits? Like, not really sure. Like we need to work this out. And it's really what you really need to be doing is like doubling down on the channels where your audience actually are and serving them on that channel of choice, as opposed to assuming they're going to be everywhere and try and cover all channels at the same time. So it's really working. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, amazing point that you made, because Hope shared in the chat that working in cybersecurity, they're so tied to ebooks and some of the more traditional paths. So I love that you added, it's really about knowing your audience and figuring out where are they at, because it's really going to be dependent. Same thing with like enterprise companies that have been around hundreds of years. They're like, we need old school stuff.
Yeah.
So it's tough. And Rachel had a really great question about their kind of, to your point of knowing where your audience hangs out and where to find them. How did you guys figure out where everyone was? And like, what are some best practices tied to that you would recommend for Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, like finding out where your audience hang out, I think a big part of that, which I will move on to, is subject matter experts. So is there a real like prominent figure in like the cybersecurity space that's like a real subject matter expert? How can you engage with them to help provide value? Like surely where they hang out, your audience will hang out, and vice versa, or they might know like where your audience hang out. Again, it's like that's me just being like off the top of my head, like that's where I would start. Secondary to that, it was running tests. So we'd ran for us, like I'll be transparent, we're lucky that we're marketers marketing to marketers. I know it's not that easy for everybody, and I know that, and we also market to sales, so it's quite, sales are very prevalent on LinkedIn, for example. But what we did do a lot of is run tests. So across like different channels, we tested like different events, we tested Twitter, we tested Facebook, and we just measured the engagement that we got, and where we got the most engagement and saw the most positive signals, that's what we doubled down on. And for us, it happened, it was LinkedIn. And I guess, yeah, again, like I get it, like some audiences are like super, super niche, but we've spoken to like DG managers that have found like a very niche community on like, I don't know, like Quora, for example, or like Reddit, like something like that. And that's actually worked really well. So there are definitely ways of doing it, but you have to test, I would say, for sure. Cool. So again, yeah, so it's like thinking about where your audience hang out, customer research and key trends as well. It's kind of an obvious one. I always feel it weird when I put it, because it's like, it's obvious you're going to have to research your customers, but it's amazing how much you don't do it. Whenever I speak to my team about, have you listened to customer calls? When we were kind of in that space where we were focusing on the leads, the response I always got was, well, yeah, I was going to do it, but then I had to speak to sales because of X, Y, and Z, or my leads weren't funneling through Salesforce and this hasn't happened. And there was always a lot of admin, and there wasn't a lot of breathing space to kind of go, right, I'm going to listen to customer calls. So we have like blockers, like some of the team put blockers in their diary, like every Friday at 2:00 to make sure we've got time to listen to calls. It's about educating the team as well, I think, around it's okay to sit and listen to a call just because you're not actively seen anywhere. It's okay. Like it's not, for us, that's more valuable work than sending out an email, for example. So I think you really have to instill that culture and get the team to really get under the skin of the audience and like know where they hang out and just understand your audience like really deeply. And that's something that we spent a lot of time doing. And I did feel a bit weird at first because I was like, oh God, I've not like sent a Slack message for like 2 hours. I've been listening to calls, but it's definitely worth it. Again, what we tried to do, and we have had some success with, is like building a following. So whether that's live events, a podcast, a YouTube channel, the great thing about that is you can evangelize that content across lots of other channels and in lots of different formats. And then really like what we try and live by is just being value-led and consistent. So the two things that we're going to focus on today are how we actually, what does it mean to be value-led and consistent? If you're going to switch up your content and it's not an ebook, then how do you implement a content creation process? And we've been talking a lot on LinkedIn at the moment about SMEs, like subject matter experts. How do you get them on board? If you do, what does that relationship look like? And what KPIs do we put in place to make sure that that activity actually happens? So there's two. I could go on forever, so I've just had to pick two, but yeah. So Jamie, I think, yeah, so Jamie's going to talk everybody through the content creation process. You can have a little break from me for a while.
Thanks, Ram. Hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm just gonna give you like a run through of like how we approach content at Cognism, and like how we organize our content in DG team. So basically we split all of our content out into separate buckets, and you can sort of see those on screen here. So we have our thought leadership bucket, our content bucket, our product bucket, and our social proof bucket. And so all of the content is split out into these various buckets, and they all have different sort of like aims and things they're trying to achieve. So like our thought leadership and our content bucket, we'll use those buckets to like, though that content is all of our like broad top of the funnel assets that we're using to like sort of like distribute top of the funnel assets to our sales persona or our marketing persona. But like, for example, to our sales persona, we're like putting out content that's like maybe like SDR tips or like sales management advice, advice around prospecting, things like that. For marketing, we index heavily on like demand gen content, and also like some wider marketing and go-to-market content as well. In terms of like our product bucket, that's all the content that we use to communicate the value of the suite of products that Cognism has, and communicating the exact value that we bring to marketers and salespeople in their day-to-day. And then social proof is pretty self-explanatory, but that's all of like the social proof, like the testimonials, the case studies, all of like taking our customers' own words to like demonstrate the impact and the value we provide to marketers and salespeople.
Hey, Jamie.
And so like,
sorry,
yeah.
question.
No.
Just to confirm, all of that content is ungated, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all of it is. Yeah, all of it's
okay.
ungated.
And then Rachel asked, which tool do you use to monitor time on page or engagement rate whenever it comes to all that content?
So we normally use a blend of, so we use Google Analytics, obviously for like time on page and things like that. Yeah. But then in terms of like engagement rate, like depends on like where the content's being sort of like distributed through. If it's like, obviously it's like LinkedIn, we'll be looking at engagement rates on there. But yeah, that does actually lead me on a little bit actually into like how this maps on to like paid social and stuff like that. But yeah, so like those are sort of like the things. So go back a slide, Fran, quickly. There we go. So yeah, so each bucket has like its own sort of like goals and aims. But like in terms of like how then that all that content then maps into like a channel, for example, for us, like a core channel is LinkedIn and Facebook, paid ads basically. So like when we sort of like map this content into LinkedIn, like each bucket has like a corresponding campaign. So like we have like our thought leadership campaigns in LinkedIn, our content campaigns, our product campaigns, our social proof campaigns. And so each of those campaigns will have like specific objectives in the platform. So like, for example, our thought leadership bucket, that campaign in LinkedIn would be set up with a reach objective. So all of the content's been tailored in that bucket for like in-feed consumption engagement, and for serving those insights to as broad a market as possible that's on LinkedIn, and trying to get as much of that insights to our market as possible. Our content bucket actually has a traffic objective. So with that bucket, we're trying to direct users and visitors from LinkedIn to some of like the ungated resources on our website. and trying to get those eyeballs onto those like broader, bigger resources on our website to get as much value as they can from them. And then for like our product bucket, we also use a reach objective. So for those, like we want to get like all of like the product value messages we have, like the key messages around the value that Cognism brings. We want to service that to as many people in feed as possible, get as many people engaging with it as possible and consuming those messages as possible. So they're educated about what Cognism does and like what value we bring. And it's a similar, we've experimented on our social proof bucket with both a conversions and a reach objective. In recent weeks, we've moved towards a reach objective, similar to the product bucket. We use that to like surface all of those testimonials, those case studies, the words of our customers, get that in front of as many users and of our market as possible on LinkedIn. And then like, obviously with those objectives, we can then map certain metrics to them. So for example, like all of our buckets are set up with a reach objective. We can look at things like video completion rates, and we can look at impressions. If we were looking at like a traffic objective, one of our buckets, we might be looking more at like CTR and time on page and things like that. But Fran's got some slides on like how we measure and stuff in a bit more detail later, so I won't dive too deep into it. But basically at Cognism, once we sort of take that content, map it into a channel like LinkedIn, we can then use like all of those metrics. We weigh all that up together. We're in the platform like every day, weigh all those metrics against each other to like know when to chop and change things out, when to optimize, when we need to like make changes basically. But as a rule of thumb, we tend to like refresh our content sort of every 6 to 8 weeks just to make sure when nothing's going stale or fatiguing basically.
Can you talk us through what that refresh process looks like? Because I mean, surely there's got to be a lot of steps involved, and then trying to figure out like what are the benchmarks that make you say, oh, we should refresh this versus not.
Yeah, so we're quite fortunate in that in the DG team, we also work closely with like our like dedicated paid social team. So like if we're doing like a refresh of the content that's on that channel, like we'll be working, like we've got like a bi-weekly meeting with them to like look at like what's happening in platform, what's fatiguing, and then we'll sort of look at it. We tend to use the buckets to sort of prioritize, so we'll go sort of like almost bucket by bucket and look at like what's most in need of servicing, what bucket of content do we need to like get into, like what do we need to brief new assets, do we need to like get new stuff into the pipeline. And so we sort of like use like things like frequency obviously to like sort of guide that. And just in general, like we have that rule of thumb of like every sort of 6 to 8 weeks, we know that we want the content to be refreshed. But if we see definite signs in the metrics, like high frequency or like poor performance in general, then we know we need to get things into pipeline earlier. And that's when we start briefing the content team, like getting those assets built if we need new assets, and then start working on like ads and things like that.
I think as well, like when it comes to this, like working out like if it's successful or not, I think my advice would be like very much, and we've said this a lot recently, is you have to kind of, and obviously it takes a few months of running this kind of model, but you have to make your own benchmarks in terms of like what success looks like and what good looks like. There's no sort of like industry standard of I mean, there's arbitrary figures like from our LinkedIn account managers that say this is a good engagement rate, but since we've actually gone, right, based on a 6-month average, what does the best engagement rate look like for us at Cognism? It's become a lot easier to see like when a set of ads has got to a point of like diminishing return, like when it needs refreshing, or if like something's really not taken off. But again, it's like you can sort of gauge it. But again, when you can, I think starting to build out your own benchmarks completely makes sense for something like this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm very curious. We've got a lot of folks that are either newer on their teams or like the marketing function has kind of been rebuilt at their orgs. How would you recommend people handle those situations when they need the time to build those benchmarks, but they're getting a lot of pressure? And I'm sure we've all kind of been in a situation like that. So what would you guys recommend to folks who are in that spot of they know they need to build benchmarks, they know that things are going to change with holidays coming up, kind of planning for that as well, but they're not getting allowed to have that time? How do you handle an obstacle like that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's quite a tough question, that. I think for us, it's like making the whole shift has been about getting buy-in from senior leadership, and it's almost like reporting what we all used to call like vanity metrics against your conversion metrics. So what's really helped us to get buy-in is when Alice, our CMO, was going to board meetings, for example, she'd report the pipeline because that's what everyone's expecting to see. But then she'd also report like positive engagement metrics and say, for example, it could be something as it's super valuable, this, but I never used to think of it as that valuable. But alongside those conversion metrics, she'd go, but actually we took 5% of the budget and we're running this on gated model. And we've got these 3 emails from people saying, from, I don't know, the sales director at X, Y, and Z, like one of our target accounts has emailed in and said, this is the best content I've read in ages. It's amazing. I didn't have to put my details in, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And it's almost like reporting those metrics, engagement metrics, against the conversion metrics gets people to really start to buy in to the mindset. And I appreciate it's difficult when you're starting out because you don't have the benchmarks, but I would say that the qualitative feedback has been just as powerful, if not more powerful, to convince senior stakeholders that this is the way we should be going, basically.
Really great points. Thank you. And Andrew shared in the chat too, they were able to get 20% test budget to shift from lead to demand. Amazing. By showing how much money they were wasting on lead gen. And now they're reporting on exactly what you guys were talking about, which is huge. That's awesome. Thanks amazing. For sharing that, Andrew. That's really cool.
Yeah, love to hear that. Do you want me to move on, Jamie, to the next slide? You tell me when you...
Yeah, so just so basically, just to give you guys an idea, this is the structure that we work under, but and we will continue to work under this structure, but there is something we want to experiment with, and we just wanted to touch on it like slightly today. So you go to the next slide, Fran. So something that I've been discussing with Fran and just in general with the team is how we approach our thought leadership and content buckets. So this is one experiment that we are quite keen to run this quarter, moving into next quarter, is I sort of mentioned both buckets we've been using internally. We've been using to promote sort of like for the marketing persona, for example, we've been using to promote like broad marketing and demand gen, top of the funnel content. And both buckets really have achieving similar outcomes. Like they make people aware of who Cognism is. They establish our sort of credibility and our authority in like the wider marketing space. But something that we've been sort of discussing was like, do we actually need 2 buckets of content to do that? Do we need 2 buckets to achieve the same outcomes? And so that sort of got us thinking. And one thing that we're sort of thinking about running like a time limited experiment on, maybe for like 6 to 8 weeks, to sort of like gauge how effective it is. But we're thinking about repurposing our thought leadership bucket to focus on pushing like one narrative that has a clear link back to Cognism as a product and like more broadly like sales intelligence as a category. So the bucket will still, as it was before, will be focused on sharing like value-led content, and that's like a key part of what we do. But the goal will be slightly different to for the content bucket, for example. So the content bucket will continue sharing all that bread and butter marketing content, but the thought leadership bucket will be wholly focused on building a narrative that fuels a need that Cognism can fill, basically, and fuels a need for Cognism as a solution. And in terms of like how we want to approach this, if anyone like sort of like follows Andy Raskin, they might be familiar with like how we're approaching it, but like we really want to try and sort of like identify one big change that's happened or is happening in B2B marketing. We want to take a clear point of view on that change and then really articulate what's needed to be a winner after that change is like taken place or as it's taken place. But that change and like what's required to be a winner, that needs to have a link back to Cognism, and like I said, it should fuel a desire and a need that we can fill. And so yeah, that's it. Broadly, they'll still be doing the same thing in terms of delivering value-led content, but just with slightly different aims. And it's just something we're going to touch on. It's something we're going to be experimenting with, and it's just something that we're like how we're thinking about content. So we just wanted to share with you.
Question: whenever it comes to dealing with thought leadership, or is it safe to say also influencer marketing to some aspect with it, because it kind of sounded like earlier, trying to leverage influencers to help push like a thought leadership type narrative. So I'm kind of curious, like how, and I think Fran, I think you're saying you might touch this, but I know a lot of folks in here have asked about that type of marketing tactic before in the community. And I'm very curious, how does it work whenever you're wanting to like bring on influencers to help push this narrative, and like, what would you recommend, like top 3 things to consider whenever you're kind of looking at repositioning like this?
Yeah, so I guess from like the subject matter expert piece, I mean, our subject matter experts are, especially on the sales side, they're sharing a lot thought leadership topics, but like a lot of actionable content as well that can be valuable and be used again. I think for us, it was about identifying like key players in the space, and reaching out and engaging with them. And we started to do like bits of content with them. And then we had conversations about entering into like a bit of a closer agreement of, you know, do you want to, and it's kind of, we position it right now as like a Cognizant brand ambassador, if we can say that. And then we will enter into agreement, and then we sort of like create like KPIs around that. So, but we started off just with like one subject matter expert in the beginning. I don't know, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was very curious because I know we've got a lot of folks that have kind of gone back and forth on, is it something they want to tap into? And is it even worth it? I think is something that's like a big question. And it kind of sounds like for what you guys are wanting to accomplish, that's almost a key pillar in going down that path.
Yeah, just to add to that, really, I suppose from my perspective, like in terms of like an influencer or like a subject matter expert, especially if like for in this particular example, if we're trying to push one particular narrative, if that person's aligned to that narrative and holds weight, then at the very least it adds credibility to the message we're trying to put across. And that's sort of like how I sort of perceive in this sort of use case, like that's how we really want to use them. But like Brand's got like a couple of slides on how we work with SMEs in very different ways as well. So we'll touch on that in a bit as well.
Awesome. Great. Thank you guys.
Cool. Are you wrapped up on this one, Jamie? Shall I go on to the subject matter expert piece?
Yeah. Feel free to move on.
Yeah. Perfect. That was
so
great.
sorry. I'm not going to let you move on yet.
Okay, great. Cool.
No, we just got a great question. Is about how to start moving the needle relating to content creation on a smaller team. They're mostly doing blogs, some PR, and a monthly webinar, and they have 5 marketers in total and are looking to hire going into next year. It's easy to see all the companies doing content creation quite well, but they also have to acknowledge that with them being smaller and limited in resources, there's some obstacles for them. So what would you say they should focus on first outside of what they're already doing?
So we actually did an episode of Demantism actually, and I did have some slides on like if I was a marketer of like if we were a team of 5, or so I'll get sharing those. So I think for me, if you're a smaller team, obviously I think there's pressure to produce a lot all at once, and when it's kind of a bit scary when you say like it has to be a consistent output, because you're like, well, we're a small team, like if we invest in one big piece. So the way we work at the moment is demand gen and content. We have content execs that sit on the demand gen team. And the reason that we made that restructure is so that content and DG were completely aligned. So we don't start the quarter and content have a list of titles they're going to focus on, and then we go, yeah, all good. And then they just write, and then we don't really speak with them again. The reason for this really close alignment is because we've completely shifted how we think about content. So I think if you're a smaller team, don't feel pressured to be doing things like, we need to do 2 blog posts every single week. Like that, you don't have to do that. So not even like the content execs on my team and on mine and Jamie's team, like they don't focus on that solely. What they do is go, how can I create the most value for our audience with the resources that I have available? So for example, we might do a big pillar page around a trending topic, but then for the next 3 weeks it could be about the people that we interviewed to get the information for that topic. We're going to ask them to record a video snippet to Zoom, and then we're going to take that snippet and we're going to put that on organic social, because that's another way of sharing it that amplifies the message. Or we're going to put some paid budget, a small amount of paid budget behind it, and test it and see how we go. And I think when thinking about that content, it's really about making it work as hard as possible and not feeling pressured that you have to be doing like loads of blog posts. In fact, I even said to the content exec on my team, if you don't write a blog post for 2-3 weeks, that's absolutely fine. If you're creating snippets and video and stuff that our audience are being receptive to, that's much more interesting to us, and that's where we get the engagement. I think, again, I feel like my answer might be a bit waffly. So if I had to choose an action to take, if I was a smaller team, I would take a channel where I could build up an audience and like a subscriber base essentially. And I think Jamie's probably got something to add.
I mean, just to add, like, I suppose, like, if you're a really small team, and just like from a perspective of like efficiency, if you're a really small team and you haven't got much resource, then like my advice would be like honing in on video and like doing an online event, repurpose that. Like, it's a much easier to take that video content and then repurpose that into like 10 to 12 different assets in a smaller team than it is like if you're like sitting there writing a 1,000-word blog. Like, if your team is too small and can't commit to like that writing piece yet, then focus on somewhere where you can. I'd say just hone in on like the content that you can actually deliver. Maybe like you just do like LinkedIn posts, plain text LinkedIn posts, like, but do what you can, but like get those thoughts and those points of views out there. That's more important, I think, than trying to get the perfect like content engine from the very get-go.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's about doing a couple of things really, really well. And also, if you do have that event and 5 people show up, it's not about the people that attend. It is obviously if you're creating them value, but it doesn't matter on like the volume of numbers. It's like, it's more that content is so valuable, it can be reused again and again. So I think it's important to think about it from that perspective as well.
Absolutely. Well, and Rachel just asked as well, if you share new content such as blog posts on social, she thinks it's traditionally what companies have used social for, but she hasn't seen as much of that, mostly thought-provoking plain text posts. And if not, how do you promote new blog posts or other newly published content?
Yeah, so like for us, promoting new blog posts can be like text posts, or it could just be like a video, like talking about it, like talking about the topic and then linking back out to that blog post. And then also like our blog posts form like such a strong part of like our SEO engine as well. We are lucky that we have a good good head count in terms of like content writers, but we don't just promote something for the sake of promoting it. We promote it if it fits in with the theme that we're focusing on at the time. So we don't always feel like we have to promote every single thing that we write.
Thank you. And I'm kind of curious then, so do you guys break up your themes by quarter or by month, or do you have like overarching themes each quarter and then each month is like a subsect that supports that theme, or like how's that engine built out?
Well, to be honest, like we're kind of testing this at the moment. So we did start to run like spotlight campaigns. So we have like one spotlight campaign as B2B marketing doesn't have to be boring. And Jamie that was Jamie's little baby, and he's done an amazing job, and it's done really well. And that was us focusing on one theme, one point of view, and really getting a strong message out there, whilst running the rest of the stuff, which is our always on. But on the sales side of the pod, because we have like Jamie focused on the marketing, and then we have another side of the team which focus on the sales persona. And we are actually now experimenting with doing it thematically, like for a quarter, but we just started doing it for Q4. So I'm not sure how it will go, but like, so far so good. But I must say that it's been a lot easier since there has been a focus, because there's so many things that you can write about. And I think having that one message amplified is better than 10 messages which aren't cohesive, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let y'all get back to your regular programming.
Thank you. No, amazing. I love these questions. Thank you. So then, I guess there's a little slide on subject matter experts. We have kind of spoken about this, so I'll whiz through it a little bit. So for us, just an example here is like types of content we've done with our sales subject matter experts. There's Ryan Reeser and Morgan Ingram. They're like really strong players in the sales space. And we work with them just to drive this authentic value-led content. I think having a subject matter expert does drive that authenticity, and it's so helpful, because if I'm shouting about on a video about, I don't know, like how to manage your SDR team, like I'm a head of demand gen, like I have no idea, it would clearly just be scripted, and it's not very authentic if that voice is me. And I think having the power of a well-known person in the space, but then also someone who genuinely lives and breathes this every day, makes it so much more engaging and much more valuable. So again, having subject matter experts has really helped us build up a following, but it's also helped them build up a following as well, right? Because we're helping them to amplify like their profiles in the space as well. So again, like we did like an analysis, and compared to like our other always on content before we started engaging with subject matter experts. We got like a 3 times higher engagement rate. There's kind of like a greater sort of like increased reach like to other networks, like individual interactions that build the community, and kind of like less sort of competition, I guess, like not everyone like shouting in the same space. It's actually, well, it's a different voice in a different place, almost like from their profile or whatever, or on a live event. So I think it's been like super beneficial to us. And if people are like questioning whether to do it, I'd say definitely do. Even if it's just starting out by engaging a subject matter expert in an interview and seeing how that content resonates, and seeing what the engagement rate's like. Compare that to like, if you're doing it with a blog, like compare that to your usual like scroll depth, like time on page. Like there's loads of tools that we use. As Jamie said, like use Google Analytics. We also use like something called Smart Octo that gives you like an excellence score and engagement score on your content. So there's loads of ways you can start to test it and see if it's a good fit for you, basically. And then just to kind of just be a bit more concrete about it, these are like some of the KPIs that we have. So again, it's the team's KPIs, and we share them with the subject matter experts, and it's like, this is the goal. We want to scale LinkedIn followers by 24K by the end of the year. We want to contribute to an uplift in organic unique blog views, so we look at that. We want so Ryan actually became the voice of our sales newsletter, so we want to see subscribers increase by 50% every quarter. Like, so it's all about like people like having a shared goal with the subject matter expert and everybody knowing what they're working towards. Otherwise it really doesn't work, because you don't get that sort of like, I don't know, you don't get that mindset where you're all like in it together and working towards it. So these are just, again, I can share the slides after, so I'm not going to read them all out, but again, this is like some of the KPIs that we put together just to really solidify the relationships with our subject matter experts.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'm so excited to dig into this a little bit more. Mike was asking in the chat about repurposing the content and like repurposing what's coming from these SMEs. And so are you guys using a tool in-house, or are you outsourcing it? Is there like a consultant you would recommend?
To like repurpose the content?
Yep.
So we do it all in-house. I think as well, what we have done is we're trying a bit more like high production stuff recently, but when we started out doing this, it was literally asking like our subject matter experts to record something on Zoom and we put it out there, or we'd host a live event and we'd literally just snippet it up as it was with the slides on the screen like we are now and put it out there. And I think that's the thing as well, like if you don't have a big team, and or maybe you just don't want to like spend the budget on it, which is totally fine, or have the budget to spend on it, then this is fine. Like we have the tools here that we can use and they're sufficient enough. We are looking at more like high res sort of production, but that is a higher lift, right? And we don't always have the time or resource to do that. Sorry, someone started drilling. Hope you can't hear that.
No, you're good.
Cool. Great. So that's the subject matter expert piece. But again, like we can share these slides afterwards and like share our KPIs. I just wanted to touch a little bit on rethinking attribution. So this is kind of like everything we've touched on, making the shift to the media machine, building that out, how we're framing the content, how we're involving subject matter experts. I think really it's good to focus on what we did at the beginning, and this ties into an earlier question on how we got buy-in for what we were doing and why it's so important to like delve into the data. So the thing we started with, and so sorry about all this, like again I'll share it afterwards, but the thing we wanted to do was start out by capturing the data, understanding the data, and then reporting on it. So that was like really important for us. Before we started thinking about what will the targets be, what will the benchmarks be, we wanted to really look at what we were dealing with. And I think if you look at the table here, like on the right, it's really focused on splitting the funnel. And this is what I'd recommend to anybody who's wanting to like make this shift. It's look at the funnel and see how it's performing. So we split our funnel out and we looked at all of our leads that we collected from ebooks and from trade shows. And we call these our low intent leads. And we actually needed 500 of those leads to close one deal. That's what the numbers look like. And then if we move on to our high intent leads, and by high intent, we mean somebody who's putting their hand up saying, I would like a demo request, and filling out the form on our website, we actually needed 25 of those to close one deal. So when you actually put this side by side, you can really see what kind of picture it's painting. And so when sales or senior leadership are saying, we just need more of those leads, you can clearly say, well, what kind of leads? Because these ones aren't bringing you any revenue or any pipeline or even like any meetings booked, really. Because I think if you look at like the lead to meeting booked conversion rate, we're almost at 40% for the high intent leads. We're at 7%. So we just really have to, I'm sorry, hang on. I'm not really good at driving these things, I must say. I'm back. So yeah, even if you're looking at the ratios, like the conversion rates, like lead to meeting booked, it's like you can already see that they're wildly different from this lead collection process versus somebody actually saying, I'm ready to buy, I want to hear more about your product. So that's one of the first things that we did. It's completely around splitting the funnel and really showcasing that. And then also just looking at these top level core metrics. So, the marketing revenue, you really have to get into it. The marketing revenue, the number of deals, sales qualified opportunities. And we just basically measured everything and looked at everything before we could start mapping out those benchmarks and targets, as I said before. So I'll just move on. But again, I'll share these so people can have a look. Again, it's like starting with the inputs and transitioning to the outputs. So Jamie touched on this before. So really we focused on looking at the platform top level metrics more than we ever had done before. So we're looking at the spend, we're looking at the ops created, deals won from that source. So that's kind of like a top level analysis that we did. But to really make that mean something, we also want to be looking at things like engagement rates, website traffic, conversion rates on key pages, like where is this coming, where are the leads coming from, like what's driving people to like make these like inbound demo requests. The thing is, like, the whole thing around attribution is difficult because the buyer journey isn't linear, so you don't know exactly where everybody is at all times, right? You don't know exactly, like in the old days it was like someone did this, then they did this, and they did this, and then they filled out a form, and we're now attributing it all to that. Now it could be, I listened to your podcast and I spoke to an old colleague. Then I went on this blog that I thought was interesting, and I thought, I'm going to submit a demo request. So for us, it was really about measuring absolutely everything. So like starting with those inputs, the platform spend, what we got out of that, looking at the website traffic, conversion rates on key pages, the organic traffic and the value there. So it's just really taking everything, and once we had a clear understanding of what worked, it was then a lot easier to like benchmark stuff out. I think, as Jamie was saying before, things like qualitative feedback, like comments on ads, I'm not saying you have to painstakingly go through every single one, but if you do, like, the insights you get from there is like invaluable. We added like self-reported attribution, so how did you hear about us, onto our thank you pages, and it's amazing like the insights that we get from there, and it really proves out that what we're doing is working. So we look at that kind of stuff like more than ever. So I guess that's just kind of a snapshot into where we started and what we're measuring. So yeah. And then the next part, so kind of like we've tried to give you like a quick like snapshot of how we've made the shift and what we've been doing, and we thought what would be a nice way to finish would be to go through tactics we've actually tried and tested, things that have worked, things that haven't, and hopefully this might spark some ideas as well. So I'll let you run through these ones.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, like Fran said, like we're just going to sort of go through some things that like have worked for us in recent months, really, and like things that we've seen success with. And we'll start with just like our on-demand email nurtures. So in terms of what I mean by this, so like obviously every marketer is familiar with like a traditional email nurture, like you would do 3 to 4 emails, like you get a content lead or like a contact into the database, they would filter into a nurture, you would then serve them 4 or 5 emails, and at the end of that sequence there would be like a bottom of funnel offer, and like that was sort of like your just standard go-to email nurture. But under this sort of like demand gen like strategy and like this demand gen sort of world that Cognism now sort of like inhabits, like we've really started to think about, okay, in that world, what is the role of like email, and what's the role of like an email nurture, and does it have a role? And it was actually masterminded by a couple of our team. So they've rethought how we approach it, and like if we're not like just trying to sort of like push people through like an imaginary funnel step by step, like how do we treat them with an email? And the way that we've gone about it is so rather than like serve them like an email at a time with like an offer at the end, their emails now completely value led. And the way we sort of like approach it is it's led by this idea that if like you serve someone like an email nurture, like we don't like know like at what point they're going to be able to engage with that. They might be busy. Like if you're serving them like an email a week, we don't know when they're going to be able to engage with that email. They might not see it. And we're completely like putting the onus on them to like be like dragged into like responding to our email or engaging with our email when it suits us. So we've tried to flip that on its head, and we'll still serve those emails like every few days or week by week, however sort of like long you sort of leave it. But rather than just serve the emails one by one, we've now housed all of the email nurtures like on one like easily searchable interactive landing page. So we'll serve those emails one by one, but it's more buyer-centric in the sense of we're putting the onus back onto the buyer to, when they're ready to consume all that content, they can if they want to. So they can, whenever they interact with each email, they can find all the content and they can read it then. They can read it like in bits, but they can read it at their own leisure, basically. So the idea is just sort of taking away like this onus of like, we're going to like send an email, like they've got to respond in that moment and engage in that moment. We're going to give them the content on demand when they want it and available to them at all times. And that sort of guided the thinking. We can probably share like a landing page after this session as well, to give more of an idea beyond the snapshot. But yeah, that's sort of what's guided our thinking. And we've seen some really good success with that in recent months, especially like with on-page metrics and things like that.
Hey, Jamie. Rachel asked in the chat, nurtures are for those who convert on your contact us forms, assuming your content is ungated, right?
Yeah, so the nurtures are set up for people in our database. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And yeah, definitely want to see a sample landing page.
I'm sure we can do that. Definitely. Away from the nurtures, like we've touched on it a little bit, but something we've really indexed heavily on the last couple of years is like our live events, but really rethinking how we approach live events. I think your classic B2B marketing event, you really like online event and webinar, you would be thinking of it through driving as many registrants as possible, getting as many leads really as possible from that webinar, so you can then funnel that into your database, and then they can funnel down into nurtures, or they can go to like your sales team for people to follow up with. We've completely like abandoned that approach. That's not something we do anymore. We don't look at it through that lens. For us now, the whole purpose of the events is that we want a regular touch point that we can be as value led as possible, and create a really interactive and like value led experience for our audience. And so we spend more time thinking about the content and thinking about like creating like a great experience for our customers than we do about like driving as many registrants as possible. And then in terms of like where we then drive the value from that, it's really post event. So like you might have seen like typically like we would repurpose our live event into like our podcast, and then it would become a blog, and then it would become an organic social post, and then it would become a newsletter. But for us, where we've definitely squeezed like the most value is taking all of that content, all of that substance from our live event, and putting that into our paid social channels, because then we've got a readily available source of content, like every couple of weeks or each month, depending on how often you run it, with a guaranteed means of distributing that to our ICP, basically. So we can take all that content, get it up and running quickly, because we can just snippet it out, and then put it straight into our paid social channels, and then get that out to, and those messages and those points of view out to our audience. But the big thing that we've been working on in recent months actually is we did originally just take the snippet straight from the show. If you've got the bandwidth and if you've got the ability, what would you recommend is still take those snippets, find those snippets in the webinar, find those bits of value, but actually go to the speakers and get them to re-record it, like face the camera, just to try and squeeze even more value out of the substance and the content from the webinar. Because then with that video, you can then tailor that more for like an in-feed experience. So it's that more suitable for like your organic social posts, your paid social posts. And it's just a way of like trying to squeeze as much possible out of the event. So you're just creating the best content you can, basically.
Jamie, that is such a great piece of advice, and it kind of ties directly into a question that we got about blanketing the sky with content. It seems to be very overwhelming. So how do you go about pulling back and getting to a more manageable amount of content that you can actually measure and evaluate when it comes to that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier. Like, I think it does obviously all depends on like the size of your team, your bandwidth. I would recommend the same again, where like hone in on the content you can produce first of all, because if you can't produce the content, then you're never going to be able to measure it in the first place, because if you can't produce it, you haven't got time to measure it. So get that nailed down. And then it depends on, I suppose it's a bigger question strategically about what content's going to resonate with your audience. But like really, I suppose the first step would be understanding how your audience wants to consume that information. And then once you understand that and you have a good handle on that, and you can do that through speaking them one-on-one, working with subject matter experts to understand your audience better. But once you understand that, then you can start looking at, okay, well, we know this content is the right content to be putting out there. It's the right formats. And then you can start thinking about measurement in a bit of a deeper way, I think.
Thank you.
Cool. And yeah, just another thing that we've been experimenting with. This is something that we've been wanting to do for a while. So like a mass like direct mail and gifting campaign. So like obviously like especially like for Cognism, like we put a lot of emphasis on like our paid social channels, and so do a lot of B2B marketing companies, and on social and digital in general. But like a well-planned like direct mail or like gifting approach or like something experiential can really be a great way to obviously cut through amongst all of that sort of like digital noise. So we really wanted to sort of like dip our toe in and start testing like this is a tactic to start amplifying sort of like our messaging and like messaging that we want to get to our audience. And so that's what sort of guided our thinking on this, is that we didn't want to just do like a gifting campaign or a direct mail campaign, like we just send something for the sake of it. Without any meaning at all. We really wanted to tie the gift or like the direct mail directly back to like a message that we want to get to our market. So what we ended up doing is we have a wider campaign that Fran mentioned I was working on, that basically one of the core themes of the campaign is that B2B marketing itself isn't boring. It's like outdated lead gen tactics that are. So what we did, like we mocked up a t-shirt, got that sort of like message and that theme printed all across the t-shirt, and then we sent out a bunch of emails, a bunch of social posts, like asking people to claim a t-shirt basically, and then from there we got anyone who claimed a t-shirt, we invited them to share a message on social of them like wearing the t-shirt or of the t-shirt, encouraging them to like share a message related to the campaign's overall message, and we incentivized them to do that by saying that you'd be automatically entered into a prize draw for a £500 Airbnb voucher. And so off the back of that, we basically had a bunch of people like organically sharing like our t-shirt with our message on, with like an accompanying message to like further amplify that. And it gave us like a very different way to like sort of amplify the message beyond like our own channels. So we got a bit of like media out of it. And yeah, it was just a different way to amplify a message. And it's something we're still like definitely like dipping our toes into and like trying to figure out exactly how we want to do it moving forward. But I think over the next year or so, it's something we're definitely still going to be doing and sort of leaning into and experimenting with. And then, yeah, finally, this is one's quite a big one for us. It's something that we've been working on heavily over the last year, is like the title says, over-indexing on BOFU and product content. So like, I think at the beginning, when we were transitioning from like this sort of lead gen setup to a demand gen setup, one of the sort of big questions that like sort of like was a bit of a troubling thing for the team was like, how much of the product do you show? Like, what do we show? Like, are we showing too much? And it's all these questions. But we've definitely, like in recent months, found that like showing as much of the product as possible and educating our audience as much as possible about the product leads to better results, basically. I mean, like if we are trying to like deliver on like a demand gen strategy where the whole point is to optimize for like high intent hand raisers, like we want people to come to us and say we want to speak to sales. Like we're not going outbound like as a marketing team and like generating leads to like follow up with. So the whole idea is to generate that, but they're only going to come to you if they know what your product does, like what value you bring day to day, and how the product works, to be honest. And so that's why we like definitely sort of like over-indexed on all of this content and all of these assets in the last year. And like a few things we've done can be as simple as like just product explainers to
Oh wow, really went for it then. It's just on my trackpad. I don't know how to do it other than this. This is the only way. I need some lessons.
But yeah, just like it can be as simple as just like product explains to the camera. We also built like an ungated product tour, our first ungated product tour, which has been really successful for us, and it's been a really great way for like us to like show our customers the actual product before they actually have to book a demo or talk to sales. We built like a lot of interactive tools like ROI calculators, so people can like get a sample of like what the Cognizant data can do for them, the value they can get from it. And also like using our CS team to like do like walkthroughs of like some of the key workflows that they work with our customers on like day to day, basically. And it was just sort of like building up all this content and like working over the last year to build up a good base of like product content has definitely put us in a lot better position and has like helped us essentially educate our audience about like what we actually can do for them and like what we do and what we are. So that's been a really big win for us. And I'd say for anyone who's like just starting out and probably doesn't have like a ton of like product content, once again, don't shy away from like doing a video just because it's not like studio quality. Like we definitely lean towards like a bias to action on this. Like 9 times out of 10, like a lot of people prefer like raw, like authentic footage anyway. But like it's more important that you get in the information out to your audience and they're understanding more about like what your product does and the value it brings than it is doing the perfect video. So yeah, that's what I definitely give that advice to anyone just sort of starting out or doesn't have a lot of content. And then just finally, something.
Yeah, we got time, Katie. Are we okay just to do one more? Or are we
sure? One more thing.
I didn't realize that.
We didn't realize the time was so sorry. Thank goodness you asked the questions during, because we've definitely got no Q&A time if there's anybody left anyway. Okay, so this is like, maybe let's just do like super high level overview of like the new tactics we're testing in 2023, I guess.
Yeah, I'll do like a whistle stop. So anyone who follows Todd Klauser and Abhay Durrani on LinkedIn might be familiar with this. So we're working closely with them to level up our content strategy. They break content down into 3 types. So type 1 is insightful substance. That's defined as like the whole content is defined by just being insightful substance. So that could be like, for example, like a video of Chris Walker or like our CMO Alice talking directly to the camera about why lead gen's a broken model. It's just insightful substance, no bells and whistles. It's a straight like talking head to the camera. Type 2 is insightful substance delivered in an interesting format. So an example of that would be like our cold calling live sessions we run. So we run bi-weekly a online like session webinar where people phone in and do like live cold calling, and they get like coached and get given tips by like our experts on the call. So the substance is the coaching and the tips that you get, and the interesting format is the live cold calling element. And then finally, type 3 is insightful substance delivered with an interesting format and built on an entertaining concept. So I don't know if anyone's seen like Lavender Joe videos that have been on LinkedIn recently. So they're basically, the whole premise is that like they built a character called Lavender Joe, goes up to people in public, and that character tries to start conversations with like cheesy, bad B2B sales lines. So the substance is that they're pointing out what's wrong with B2B sales. The interesting format is the character that they've developed, Lavender Joe, to deliver that substance. And then the entertaining concept is the humor baked into it, the absurdity of the situation. And so for Cognizant, sorry, I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible. So for Cognism, we've got a lot of type 1 content and like some type 2 content. And like we have a very efficient engine for getting that type 1 content out there, particularly like blogs and videos and things like that. But like for us, we want to make our content and our creative work a lot harder. Like we don't just want to be reliant on, for example, like paid social as a tool to like distribute that. Like we want our content and creative to like reach more people and do the work for us. So we're going to index a lot on type 2 and type 3 content moving forward, especially into the next quarter, into next year as well. So some things we've started working on, that B2B marketing, that boring campaign I mentioned earlier, we're building like a B2B marketing gallery for that. So that's just going to be a showcase of like all of like basically just all great B2B marketing example campaigns. And it's just like a bit more of an interesting format. So we're going to like house it online as like a gallery. So that's in the works at the moment. Hopefully it should be released in the next couple of weeks. A couple of weeks ago, we released our demand gen swipe file. So that's just repurposing all of our old best performing ads and housing it in this like online swipe file, Trello board with like an explainer video on the page of like how to use them and like what they are. And it's just like an interesting format in which to share that substance and that those insights. We're going to dip our toes into type 3 by doing like a B2B marketing like parody video, like a skit. So that's just us sort of like really sort of like testing like entertaining content really for the first time, and sort of like dipping our toe in there and start to try and broaden like how we approach content. And our CMO Alice is also going to be releasing the diary of a first time CMO, which is like basically she's been posting on LinkedIn for years since she started as CMO at Cognism, and she has like a big backlog of posts with tons of lessons, and she's going to package all them up into like one diary for CMOs and for marketers to get advice from. And so that's just going to be an interesting format in which to package up, but we might even end up repurposing that into like a type 3 down the line and trying to turn that sort of substance into something entertaining as well. But that just gives you an idea of how we're trying to like level up our content. We're trying to sort of move up those different types, those different levels to make our creative and our content work a bit harder.
That's awesome. We are very over time, so thank you.
Sorry, Katie.
Everyone hanging out with us still, and this was like amazing. I can't wait to get the slide deck. I'm so excited. This was just like blew my mind. And whenever I first saw these slides, I was like, this is gonna be really stinking cool. So I'm very excited about this. So
thank you so much. Sorry
absolutely. No, this is awesome. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Jamie. To everyone else, we'll get the recording out soon, and I'll work with Fran and Jamie on getting the slides and those landing pages y'all asked about. As always, if you've got questions, drop them in the community. If you're not a community member, go sign up at demand.community. And Fran and Jamie will be in there, you know, as 1,000 other B2B marketers will be in there as well to help answer questions for you. So thank you both so much. This was like amazing. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for having us. Yeah, at least it shows we're enjoying what we're doing. We can't stop talking about it. All right, see you later.
Okay, thanks for having us.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.